just $6.99.
Available now.
Ah. Okay, I'll wait for everyone to get back in here. Hold up. Hello, hello. Is anyone there? Please, I'm trapped in a cave in space. Hello. If anyone's there, please tell me in chat that you're here. Because, nope. No one's here? Okay, I'll just go. I'll go right to hell. Why does my internet keep cutting? God damn it. Welcome back to the stream. We're back to the man stuck in the cave and his legs on the line.
They're too sweet.
So off Miller goes to Floyd's cave.
Floyd's cave.
Back over at the cave, Homer is sitting outside trying to recuperate as Miller wanders up. He glares at the man in his city clothes and answers every question with either a grunt or a one-word answer.
Yeah. Sure.
Finally, he gestures to Sand Cave.
Listen, you want more information? The hole's right behind me. Why don't you go take a look yourself?
Now, Miller is only 21, but he is a slender and determined man. He takes on the challenge. So he removes his suit, drapes himself in coveralls, and grabs a lamp. Miller slowly enters the cave.
Oh god,
He
wait.
finds himself
This
slipping in
reporter's
puddles
going in
and
there?
having to correct his balance against the ever-softening walls. These were accumulating problems thanks to the gawkers outside who had lit campfires all around the entrance.
What?
That
They lit campfires around the entrance, so why not make the hole bigger? One problem at a time right now. They lit campfires around the entrance, so all of the smoke, all of the heat would just go right into the, what I'm assuming is frozen cave? Hold on, this is making an even bigger problem than there was. But why not make the hole bigger? I'm assuming Floyd tried to make the hole bigger as best as he could. And if they were to start making the hole bigger, the cave may just block off, leaving Floyd screwed inside the cave. So it's like, do you make the hole bigger, risking the entrance to be blocked, making it impossible to get to Floyd to begin with? Or do you use what you have right now to make it bigger? I mean, to dig him out, essentially.
That caused snowmelt, and the stable environment of the cave is starting to shift. But Miller makes it further than most. And all that's left is that final squeeze, and he's there. He stops. He takes a moment and decides to call out to Floyd.
Floyd!
Hearing there is someone on the other side, he feels ashamed not to try. So he closes his eyes and moves forward. His slender figure begins inching through. The crystal gypsum cuts into his elbows and tugs at his clothes. He gets snagged. He's spluttering through the pools of muddy water. He stops, collects himself, and pushes on. He can barely inhale. If he gets stuck in here, he can only hope that someone else can come in from behind and pull him out by the legs. But eventually, he makes it through. Fantastic. He's now standing on the edge of a 10-foot pit, and he clumsily bumbles his way down. He
Okay,
sat
a
right
10-foot
next to
pit,
Floyd,
that's better.
ready to interview him. But Floyd didn't really answer any of his questions. In fact, he was incoherent. At the moment, he is sitting in a pool of water that is 12 degrees, slowly sapping his body temperature. He is dying from exposure. The cold is diminishing Floyd's mental faculties, and he can barely make sentences. So Miller took a few mental notes, and he left. He worked his way back through the squeeze, past the turnaround room, and out into the daylight. He is covered in mud and scratches and numb head to toe. And when Homer saw, his hope reignited. Someone else had made it to Floyd.
You and me. Together, we can get Floyd out of there.
So this news reporter just went through that crevice just to ask him a few questions. How desperate for your job are you, mate? But okay.
If Miller hadn't gone to that cave, there's a good chance that Floyd's story would have remained an obscure footnote in the back pages. But the interviews and first-person accounts gave the audience a glimpse of something real. Fear, hope, desperation, the full range. And so from Los Angeles to New York, Floyd's story was picked up everywhere and described the Kentucky man's plight in sensational detail. It was also the era when radio became a regular feature for regular Americans. Radio allowed something new, hourly updates, letting people
Wow,
get
is this
engrossed
far back?
into the story.
Jesus.
So, mostly thanks to Miller, the story of Floyd over the next week would grow and grow, seemingly frothing over into every aspect of American life. The press at large would be clamoring over each other for every little extra scrap of detail they could get about Floyd. And everybody wanted to know, will this man make it? Back outside the cave, someone new enters the scene. Lieutenant Robert Burden, a thin but strong 33-year-old Louisville firefighter. Like Miller, he was able to navigate the passages of the cave and brave the squeeze. Scratched up pretty good and drenched in cold, muddy water, he managed to get through. He grabbed a rope and confidently lowered himself to Floyd's position. It was not an optimistic sight. Floyd's condition was deteriorating.
Well, we've got a heck of a problem here, but I think I can get you out with a rope.
Floyd nods in approval.
Go on.
We might just pull your bloody leg off.
Just pull my leg off then. Get me out of here.
Burden returned to the surface and faced the crowd. He announced.
We will attempt a rope pull.
The crowd murmured. It was dangerous. It would certainly break his foot and could altogether pull it off. If there are jagged rocks, you'll fillet the poor man. Amongst the crowd, a doctor stepped forward. A rope pull could stretch his internal organs and cause them to rupture. You'll kill him. But Floyd is dying of exposure down there. The situation is becoming desperate. Burden put caution to the side.
The time for strategy is over. Now we try brute force.
Bro.
Bo. What the? Bo.
Bro.
There. Why? Okay, this is getting... What the? Excuse me? What's going on? What is this? What? It's a Sawyer? What are you doing? Oh, I guess this is why he's hallucinating right now. I didn't know this was getting Eldritch Horror, but okay. Let's do this.
Floyd! We're here. We're gonna get you out of here.
Okay, so he was
After
hallucinating all
79
that.
hours in the cold water, he is delirious, fading in and out of consciousness. Homer gave his brother some coffee and fed him a couple of ham sandwiches. That warms him up and gives him a bit more energy, and he comes back to lucidity.
Oh, much better.
I'm gonna put the special harness around you. Burden and Miller, they're here too. We got 3 more boys right up the cave, and they're all ready to pull as hard as they can to get you out of here.
Floyd was frightened.
I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna hurt.
He gave his brother some whiskey and a strong sedative to calm his nerves, and also to help him withstand the shock in case his foot is destroyed. Floyd took...
So it's an all or nothing thing where they either pull him out now or he dies slowly of hypothermia and freeze to death. On one hand, I'd just say get like a heater or a fire down there. But also, I'm afraid that if there's more heat within the cave, it'll just start crumbling down and pile on top. This is like so risky. How are you gonna... Oh my god. His leg could just get torn off right now.
took the opportunity to appreciate being surrounded by friends and family.
Go on. Do it.
All right, strap him up.
Homer tied the harness around Colin's chest and knotted the rope.
Ready?
Above, Miller is crouched at the top of the pit.
Ready?
Burden clenches the cord from further up the cave.
3,
The rope goes taut.
2,
Do it.
1.
Oh!
Instinctively, Floyd gasps. The force of 6 men pulled against the clutches of the cave. Floyd began to scream. His body was being pulled up from the rubble. The gravel was beginning to shift. Burden clenched his teeth.
Oh, harder!
Floyd screamed harder as well. Now, Floyd was trapped in a supine position, but the direction of the rope caused an upwards force that wrenched him vertically. His torso was being compressed and bent against the ceiling of the trap. It would kill him. Floyd's screaming intensified, and through gasps was begging them to stop. The screams filled the echoing cave, but it did not stop. The agony continued, on and on, with no progress.
Enough! Enough! You guys are killing him!
Homer pulled in the
said
opposite
stop.
direction to give his brother some reprieve. Somehow, Homer mustered the strength to altogether wrench the cord from the other men's hands. The rope went slack. Homer, Floyd, and the rope lay limp on the cave floor, panting and exhausted. No progress had been made.
Jesus, they didn't think about that
The
before
cave would not let this man go. The futility of the situation sank in, and all they could do was leave for now and reassess. Everybody was shaken by the experience. Burden fainted as he crawled towards the exit. Most of the other men had to be carried away. Outside, the crowd had grown to 200. They buzzed and asked useless questions, and Homer walked dejectedly past them.
At this
He
point,
sat
they
by
should just
thinking
kick everyone out.
what he could do. The cause seemed hopeless.
Homer?
Then, someone showed up who could turn things around. He looked up to see a childhood friend of both his and Floyd's, Johnny Gerald. Gerald knew more about cave rescues than most. In fact, just that summer prior, he had helped untangle Floyd from a different snag. He was just the man for the job.
Alright, let me go see him. Well, look who it is.
Floyd perked up immediately,
Yay.
thrilled to see Gerald.
Yay!
Let's see what we can do.
Gerald jumped down. For the next 3 hours, Gerald went back to the original plan of prying away rocks. His stamina was good, and progress was surprisingly good as well. For several more hours, he continued, just moving stone after stone.
Okay, they're
New
going
one
back
would
to
fall
the
into
original
place,
plan.
And he'd move that one too. By midnight, he had enough room to shift position and clear some of the gravel that was at each side of Floyd's body. Gerald would spend several more hours scooping. And it worked. For the first time, Floyd's torso was now available. Then his hips, his upper thigh. For the first time in over 90 hours, Floyd was able to wiggle his arms, his hips, and even that trapped right leg, though it was very painful to do. In that one session, Gerald managed to move a half-ton of rock, but there was still a lot more to go. And that rock by his foot was still holding him in place.
Oh yeah, that
By 2
rock's
a.m.,
still there.
Gerald was spent. He needed rest, and he was ready to head back outside.
Floyd, tomorrow, you're gonna be a free man.
Now here you might think that things will become straightforward. They did not.
Oh god, what
now
happened
that
next?
space had been cleared, Burden became convinced that if he could get down that passage again, he could free Floyd with another rope pull.
No,
First deciding with
keep him
both
out of
feet
there.
or just one. But when Burden tried to enter the
Wait,
cave
hold up.
again, he was still
What does it say? He obtained a special rope and harness from the fire department. So now with a special rope and harness, you are able to rip his leg off even better. I don't even know which plan is supposed to be better.
only rebuffed by the locals. They were playing gatekeeper. They had been specifically instructed to not let anyone in, and they were especially opposed to Burden making another rope pull after word spread about the disaster of the first attempt. He tried to reason with them.
Let me try the rope pull again. It'll work this time.
They wouldn't let up. Instead, they shouted obscenities and shoved him in the other direction.
How does Popeye's chicken sandwich?
Oh,
get
I
so
wonder how
crunchy,
Popeye's
juicy,
chicken
and
sandwich
juicy?
makes a juicy,
We
tasty
make
sandwich.
everything with love.
Good thing I'm not gonna let you find out.
Meanwhile, Gerald and Homer are incapacitated with exhaustion, and Miller was busy filing some paperwork for the Louisville Courier. Nobody else had the ability or the authority to take action, so Floyd spent all of that morning alone.
Hello? Is anyone there? Help! Hey!
It's been 100 hours since he's down now.
Word spread about Floyd. Miller's reporting had been picked up by the AP Newswire, and they distributed it amongst their hundreds of partnered newspapers. For Miller, it would be the biggest moment of his career. But he
Keep in mind, he is literally down in complete and utter darkness. In the equivalent of a coffin.
didn't stop to pay
For
it mind.
100
He
hours.
spent the day hatching a rescue plan. Miller descended into the cave and set to work. When he entered, he found that the team before him had strung light bulbs all through the cavern,
Oh,
leading all the way down to Floyd.
is that better?
Very handy.
It
A
is.
bulb was also put around Floyd's neck to keep him warm and make sure that he was never again left in the dark. Miller popped down to Floyd.
Ah, Floyd, fancy seeing you here, buddy.
Reusing that syrup tin, he started offloading gravel into
I have-
buckets.
I have
Those
issues with
buckets
those
were then
lights.
passed up and down the cavern. And so it went on for the next 2 hours. Miller stopped for a break. He took some bread, milk, and whiskey, and sharing it with Floyd, they started to get to talking. Floyd had been in that cave for over 100 hours now, and seeing everyone working together, Floyd was overcome with a sense of hope and relief, and so he began spilling his heart out to Miller. Here is what he is quoted in the newspaper.
I believed I would go to heaven. I can feel that I'm to be taken out alive and with both my feet. I kept thinking, what would happen if the rock above me would fall? It caused me to shudder. I kept thinking to drive my mind to something else, but it wasn't much use. I couldn't do much to help those who came to help me, but I knew that a lot of people were willing to do all in their power. It gave me courage. Tuesday morning, I thought to myself, 4 days down here, and no nearer freedom than I was on the first day. How will it end? Will I get out? I couldn't think of it. I have faced death before. It doesn't frighten me, but it is so long. Tell them I am not going to give up. Tell them I'm going to fight and be patient and never forget them.
Meanwhile, Floyd's story...
That was one
kept
hell of
going.
a speech.
Pedestrians would gather around corner store windows to read the latest bulletins. The press
Wendigoon?
began using giant typefaces, commonly only reserved for declarations of
I don't
war.
know who Wendigoon
Churches
is,
in
but
all of the nearby counties were holding services for Floyd. Theaters even interrupted their shows to update the audience. Now, at the time, President Coolidge was in charge, and his Secretary of Commerce was a geologist, Herbert Hoover. Now, Mr. Hoover followed the story very closely, and so it was likely that the president did too. Even Congress paused session to ask about the latest news from Sand Cave. By the end, the Floyd Collins incident would explode into the third largest non-political story between World War I and World War II. All of this excitement brought an inundation of people to Cave City. Old population, 690. Yawn. New population, 10,000. Hotels ran out of food. Residents turned their homes into makeshift hotels, charging sizable premiums to let people nap in their bathtubs. The banks quickly ran out of on-hand cash, and 4,500 automobiles impatiently sat backed up for 2 miles from 20 different states to drive onto the Collins farm and turn their pristine green pastures into swampy parking lots. Deep below all those tourists, there's Miller, trying to free Floyd.
they're literally having a festival right above the equivalent of someone's casket. That is... feels awful just to think about. Oh dear God. I just love that this place, this whole, was it city? They gain all the tourism from this one guy suffering. So technically, he's getting what he wanted, but not in the way that he wanted.
Alright, a little bit of setup. Floyd, Miller, some remaining rubble.
Yep, Floyd,
For anyone
Miller,
to lift
rock.
the rock by hand would be impossible because Floyd's body obstructs the hole. Miller grabs a crowbar and shoves it through the gap. Now he's going to lever it off Floyd's foot. Cool. The crowbar is
So
now
they're gonna try
wedged
to lift
against
the
the
rock.
Next, he takes a jack. He positions it on top of the crowbar so that it will be forced against the ceiling. However, problem. That jack is too big. It doesn't fit. Miller yells up the tunnel for a smaller one.
I have no
but
idea
this
what
took
that
some
is.
time. And when it arrived, too small. Won't reach the ceiling. But instead of sending for another one, Miller takes 2 blocks of wood and bolsters them underneath the crowbar. Right, so the crowbar now sits higher, it fulcrums against the blocks, and the jack is sitting on top. All Miller has to do is expand the jack, which he will do using this spanner, holding it at the very tips of his fingers. Sounds easy. It's not. But that's the plan.
None of this
Let's
sounds
get it out.
easy.
He turned the wrench, the jack expanded, and the crowbar took strain.
Oh, you kidding me?
Airheads have more fun.
How many commercials does this guy have in one video? There.
The whole thing slid apart with a pang. Floyd wasn't hurt, but Miller was contorting and exerting his whole body from back to fingertip. They tried again. Same result. Miller tried a new angle. Maybe this time. The jack pressed. The tension increased. And this time, the rock moved. It fucking moved. With each turn, the stone shifted a little more. Miller's hands shook with adrenaline, his face and body dripping with sweat. Pang. One of the blocks slipped, and the wooden tower went sideways. The rock painfully slammed back down on Colin's foot.
You'll get it next time, Miller. Try again.
Miller did. Again and again. Adding blocks, taking them away, new crowbar position, changed the jack position, every angle, all while Floyd was there, cheering him on.
Yay!
For the next 4 hours he tried. No progress. Miller was exhausted. He couldn't do this on his own, but he was the only one slim enough to get in through the gap. The group decided to concede for now and return to the surface. They would take just a small break, but it looked to everyone like there was a clear way to get this man out. So Miller and Burden crawled back through the mud and the whines of
Yeah.
As they made their way through, the cave was visibly sagging. The ceiling seemed lower. Parts were harder to navigate than
Wait.
before, especially now with their bruised
Is the
and
cave
crumpled
literally
hands.
caving in on
But
itself?
they made it outside to the fresh, early morning air. And here is where they're greeted with a new sight. Dozens of soldiers. The National Guard had
Pog.
arrived. In addition to the National Guard, a
So
new
the military is
figure
actually
joining
getting
the
involved.
story, Henry Carmichael. Now, Carmichael was the general superintendent of the Kentucky Rock Asphalt Company. He had been on site since Tuesday, and he was appalled at how primitive the rescue attempts had been. Shortly after Miller and co. had exited, Carmichael sent 2 men into Sand Cave to assess the structure's stability. They soon came back with a report. It was not good. Near the final squeeze, large cracks had formed. The ceiling was beginning to droop.
Near the...
Alright, so the following is a recounting of events from one of Carmichael's men, Casey Jones.
Okay, so this is the guy who...
Casey and another worker
Was
spent
hired
about
by the
an hour
military.
in the cave, surveying its condition, looking at the boards, the ceiling, the stability of the walls. He continued deeper towards Floyd. He was fighting against his nerves. The shifting of the rock pinged his every instinct to flee. But he heard Collins moaning ahead, so he pushed himself on. He managed to make it through the squeeze and he arrived at the 10-foot pit. Seeing Floyd trapped, he tried to ignore the pebbles that were tumbling behind him.
Please, come down.
I can't right now, Floyd, but I will when I get back.
Behind Casey, his partner is begging to leave. Below Casey, Collins is pleading for help.
Please, I'm so thirsty.
Okay.
Casey slid headfirst into the pit and hastily ladled Floyd some coffee. But Floyd rejected it. Rumbling intensified from above, and in that moment, Casey realized that this was not a plea for sustenance. Floyd knew that a cave-in was inevitable. Scared and approaching his 5th day trapped, he was completely at his wit's end. He knew he was about to be trapped.
5 days trapped.
He didn't want to be trapped alone.
For God's sake, Casey, come on, you'll get us killed.
So, wait.
Stay with me, please. Don't leave.
The way you just said that, he did not want to be trapped alone. So, was he just saying, I want coffee, just to get him to be stuck there with him? That's kind of fucked up. Oh my god, he's so desperate. This is a fucked up situation because he literally needs to go if he doesn't want to get trapped with him. And considering all he has on him is like coffee, like, what are you supposed to do? You can't do anything unless you like take the resources away from the guy who's stuck. Like, the best he could do is leave the supplies for him to survive down there as he goes back up to get the tools he needs.
Casey looked into Colin's eyes, set the coffee down, and pulled himself out of the pit. He wiggled underneath the sagging ceiling and crawled towards the turnaround room as fast as his limbs could scramble against the cave walls.
And he
looked
escapes
back to
the
see
squeeze.
passage closing like a maw. Reflections from the bulb shining around Floyd's neck were no longer visible. Instead, just sobs could be heard, muffled from behind the rocks.
So now he's actually trapped in an actual cave-in.
Miller and Burden awoke in the late morning, confident that today would be the day that they saved Floyd. They had some new equipment too. Some wire to wrap around the wooden blocks to prevent them from slipping. And they changed their mind about that acetylene torch. They'll use it to burn away 2 rocks that had previously blocked their way. But when Miller got to the turnaround room, all of that optimism left him. The entrance to the squeeze was now just a pile of debris. Miller froze, staring at it for a long while. Then he sighed and did the only thing he could think: attempt to move some of the stones. But each adjustment led to more rocks just tumbling down and landing in that space. He persisted until... crash. A large chunk of clay landed on his feet. Recognizing the danger, Miller returned to the surface. 15 minutes later, he emerged from the cave with a bloodied up nose and bruises down his back and shoulders.
So now the cave is literally breaking around him.
Miller just says, for God's sake, just don't let Homer or anyone else back in there. Now, he didn't actually need to worry about Homer going back in there because he was sidelined with illness. But he did, however, need to worry about Gerald because he was furious. Gerald had warned everyone that putting dozens of people in Sand Cave would cause a collapse. It certainly did. The rest of that day would be wasted as men threw blame around and screamed at each other about how to handle the cave-in. And Floyd spent the rest of that day alone. The surveyors continued checking the cave throughout the day. By the evening, Carmichael had ordered everyone to an assembly. Gerald took the floor. He was going to try one last daring rescue. He boldly announced his plan and an ultimatum.
Listen up. There's death down there. The walls and ceilings are crumbling. Unless you're determined to take the biggest chance you ever took in your life, tell me now and stay outside.
Next, they told all the Gorkas to get the fuck out of the cave, clear off. And over
Thank
the next
you.
8 hours, Gerald
The
would
one
enter
thing you
and
needed to
leave
do.
the Sand Cave at least 5 times, chipping away at that pile of debris. In the woods, men sawed trees and chopped logs to shore up the cave walls. Underground, the crew reinforced cracks and wobbling boulders with fresh strips of wood. Gerald assessed that about 4 barrels of rocks would need to be moved, and piece by piece they made that happen. Steadily, they managed to move enough rock to allow Gerald to get within earshot of Floyd.
Hey, hello, I need food.
Bad news. We can't reach you. But hold on. We're coming.
Stone by stone they continued. After a few hours, the light of the bulb around Floyd's neck was peeking through. A couple more hours, enough room for Gerald to squeeze through.
Okay, that's enough. Floyd, I'm going for now. But when I get back, I'm gonna get you out of there.
Wait, how long
Exhausted
has she
but
been
still
working?
determined, Gerald crawled back up the cave and marched to the men huddling outside.
Gather the equipment, and in an hour's time, it's gonna be me and Floyd coming out of that cave.
Okay, I don't believe you.
Gerald entered
Why
Sand Cave
wasn't
for
telling
his final
all the
time.
unnecessary people to go
The
away
walls
the
had
first
been
thing they did?
reinforced. But mud and water was accumulating everywhere. He waded through it and pressed on past the
I don't know why they didn't tell people to fuck off immediately. Especially when the military started to get involved, because they should know that they would just cause problems. I guess you always see these police scenes with gawkers all around the police tape. And I guess there's some reason why they're allowed to do that. But, yeah. They should have just been off the property within the first 50 hours.
danger of the sagging ceiling. With determination on his face and a grease gun clutched in his right hand, he scrambled towards Floyd. But before the final squeeze, he stopped.
I guess freedom
It was
of the
all
press.
Gone. The cave ceiling had crumbled once again. Gerald stared motionlessly at the pile. Then he began to yell.
Floyd!
A rock disconnected from the ceiling and tumbled onto Gerald's head.
Ah!
Luckily,
Oh
just
no.
a small one. He rubbed his scalp and called out again.
Floyd!
This time, a moan. It rumbled from the other side. Fearing that his friend was slipping out
I
of
couldn't even hear
consciousness,
that.
Gerald willed himself against the cave, launching the debris behind him with force. He ignored the pain from being struck on the head and clawed at the stone pile. He carried on this way for several minutes, until a sharp, heavy rock dropped from the ceiling
Oh no.
and landed squarely on his back.
Oh no.
No more than 15 minutes later, Gerald returned to the surface, defeated. Only after the cave-ins did they start to think about all of the things that they could have done.
Wait, why didn't we rig a portable telephone line? That would have been incredibly simple here in 1925.
Yeah, why have we been running in and out to deliver updates? Why didn't we give him an AM radio? He could have had something to listen to and receive messages of support from the public.
Wait, why don't we rig up a tarpaulin so we could lift his torso up so he wouldn't be slowly dying of exposure?
Oh God, why didn't we run a feeding tube? That's also a technology we have in 1925.
Oh, for
All
God's sakes.
Too late. Now what? The one route to get to Floyd is closed forever. That meant two options. Number one, capitulation. Surrender him to the cave. Or number two, dig down from directly above Floyd. Now the prospect of
Wait
digging
a
from
second.
above seemed almost fanciful. At least it did in the beginning. But luckily, they had some help. Owing to Miller's reporting, Floyd had become practically the most famous person in the country. The rescue had become a high priority for the governor of Kentucky. Lieutenant General Denhart enters the scene. He's been updated on the situation, and following shortly behind him is a small army. Denhart
He'll go on the murder. Wait, he'll go on to murder his girlfriend, Veru Taylor. He's brought to trial, but results in a hung jury. I can't even see what's beneath that. Something, retrial, Verus? I can't even read that name. Brothers tracked and shot him to death. They were all... I can't read, but...
Enters the scene for the governor of Kentucky, Lieutenant
Basically,
General
he killed
Denhart
before his
enters the scene.
trial.
He's been updated on
down,
the situation,
all
and
accurate.
following shortly behind him is a small army of miners and engineers. He declared to the despondent crowd, "Gentlemen, I am here on behalf of the governor. The purse strings of Kentucky are open. Take this blank check and bring that man out alive."
That is a big thing to do. Blank checks.
American cheese. Jimmy John's new all-American beefy crunch.
What I want is for you to choose for yourself who you will be.
Your destiny has arrived.
Floyd, in that cold, wet confine, could not have imagined the scale of the operation that was going on 55 feet above him. Authorities assumed control of Colin's rescue. Denhart gave Henry Carmichael the lead to dig, and Carmichael raced to get to work. He enlisted his employees, his fleet of expensive high-tech machinery. Professional groups were brought in from all across the state. Local townspeople were mostly excluded, and for the first
Thank
time
God.
since Collins
No
had
more
been
locals.
tracked, work was now about to go ahead in a systematic manner. Everyone knew the plan, everyone had something to do, and everyone was working fast. But just as hopes were rising, they were once again dashed against the rocks.
God damn it, what happened
They
now?
had all of this state-of-the-art machinery shipped in and assembled by the engineers and rearing to go, and it was all worthless. See, the problem is, the cave drew air into it.
Oh,
These diesel-powered
no.
engines pumped out enormous volumes of choking
So you're gonna
exhaust.
just kill
Within a
him.
day's operation, the cave would be filled with carbon monoxide, and Floyd would be dead from asphyxiation.
Which
Just
he
as
would probably
quickly as
want at this
solutions would
point.
arise, the cave would parry them away. It refused to let this man go. So engineers and miners had wasted hours assembling everything, only to realize that they had to pack it all up and cart it away.
God.
Because the digging of a 55-foot shaft would be done with picks and shovels. Carmichael didn't know much about caves, but he knew a lot about quarrying, and he estimated that his team of 75 volunteers could dig and dredge at a rate of 2 feet per hour.
He doesn't know about caves, but he knows about quarrying. Meaning, he's used to making a lot of noise, he's used to making the earth shake. So, theoretically, if he doesn't know about caves, he could still make the entire cave collapse around him. Oh,
If they worked around
God.
the clock, they would be digging directly into the spot where Floyd lays within 30 hours.
Wait!
Now, is it possible that Floyd could...
Wait, if you're digging directly to where Floyd is, you're just gonna crush him beneath you. Okay, now I'm...
Survive for another 30 hours? Absolutely. Let's go. The first ton was moved, and at first, it was easy work. Just dirt and clay. Carmichael understood well that this was a race against time, so he watched the men closely,
5
and if they
foot,
seemed to be slowing
6
down,
foot,
even a little,
7
they
foot.
would be yanked out, and immediately a new worker subbed in.
Yep.
Nonetheless, the pace slowed. By 10 feet,
Systematic
the
and
shaft
quick.
narrowed greatly, which meant that only 2 men could work at a time. At 15 feet, they hit boulders. Pickaxes went in, and a system of pulleys and buckets had to be used to cart the rock out. Tracks were even laid to ferry the refuse to a dump site.
Good.
Time passed.
Systematic.
Hours passed.
Multiple
Night
hours.
went to day. The day was hot. This was yet another problem.
Oh, no.
Because it's early February, there's tons of ice still in the ground, and its exposure to the fresh midday sun meant that the walls of the shaft were softening and the ground becoming sodden. The pace of digging slowed. It was now only half a foot per hour. Most anyone could do was watch helplessly on the sidelines and pray. Interestingly, though, there were a lot of people on the sidelines. Floyd wouldn't have believed that the space above him had turned into a literal carnival in his honor.
Are you kidding me?
He showed up to sell hamburgers, hot dogs, and souvenirs. Families sprawled out over blankets to listen to hymns from local church groups. The local mountebanks sold moonshine and miracle cures. There was even a bloody juggler.
Are you?
Man Lee was there, walking around, shaking his jar, and soliciting.
That's his father, by the way. That's his father asking for money. Are you fucking kidding me? The entire area above him turned into a festival.
Donations. But where were Homer and Burden and Miller during all of this? Okay, let's back up a bit. People did not properly understand exactly how Floyd was trapped, and the news didn't help much either. So the obvious question started to arise. Why hasn't he been rescued yet? Just clear some gravel or pull a rope. How is this so hard? Motive was attributed.
I heard they didn't even want to have him rescued at all. I heard that they're doing all of this for publicity.
And
you know
this
what?
Activity of soliciting donations, remember from before, further inflamed rumors.
Yeah.
I bet Floyd isn't even trapped in there.
These were all real rumors, and they got worse.
You know what? I've heard he comes out at night, and then he just goes back in the morning.
Other rumors included...
I heard that after Floyd went into the cave, someone murdered him.
Others said...
I think they're withholding food and water from him, so he dies.
This whole thing is a fraud.
As time went on, it was harder and harder to ignore the hoax claims. Then, people started to form righteous mobs, claiming the whole thing was a fraud, and they started to get nasty. In fact, 2 people even went to the telegraph office and pretended to be Floyd, sending telegrams to his mother. Here's what it said. Quote, "Please contradict statements that I am buried alive in Sand Cave. Stop. Tell mother I am all right. Stop. Am coming home. Stop. Floyd Collins."
So they
Naturally,
faked messages.
The AP published these telegrams unquestioningly, and now word is out to the press that he isn't actually in the cave after all. That made the authorities look foolish, and it could not go on. So, a hasty court-martial was arranged, and Homer, Miller, and Gerald were summoned. They hold one session on Monday and another on Tuesday. Lee and everyone else is cleared of charges, a retraction is written, and things carry on.
To be fair, it does look suspicious when you put all the pieces together, especially with the father. And you have a little carnival above the place. How do you even manage that?
Generators
okay,
running.
they're still digging.
Pumps churned out water. Men continued working in shifts and carrying away the earth. Here they are with strips of lumber to shore up the walls. They were only 25 feet down. The pace had slowed to 4 inches per hour. In their desperation, they resorted to dynamite. But this did little to the boulders. Despite all these bleak circumstances, people's spirits were high, because everyone was keen for their turn to dig. And because they had one more thing to latch onto. He is probably still alive.
Probably.
Now, how do they know that? Okay, so remember that light bulb around Floyd's
Well,
neck?
it's a light.
Well, it's powered by a simple copper wire. Bare copper wire is subject to very minute fluctuations in resistance. So, an engineer rigs up a radio amplifier to this wire to read the current and see those small fluctuations.
Oh, so they
There
can
they
hear
go.
his heartbeat.
About 20 per minute, the rate of steady breathing.
Ah.
As his chest expands and contracts, they can read it from this device. And so, they kept going.
That's clever. For once, that's clever.
And going. And going. 30 hours was the original estimate. Now 144 hours had come and gone, and they were only at 44 feet.
He's been down there for 3 days with only coffee?
Rain that mixed with dirt to make mud, much of which then froze to make ice. Ice which expanded and damaged the integrity of the shaft walls. Slowing down with every hour, they continued. Many more
Why
hours
didn't they get a
passed, and
rooftop
they were
over
getting
this?
Close.
Like,
but it was now
nah.
15 days since Floyd was first stuck in that cave, and people had mostly lost hope. That excitement in the newspapers was tempering down. Visitors began clearing out from Cave City. Many still held on to hope, but their final lifeline, that light bulb, had burnt out. And it wasn't possible to do any more readings on the radio amplifier without it. No one knew if Floyd was still alive.
You still got a few feet to go.
Another 51
more feet.
hours would pass before, finally, they reached the 60-foot depth.
I'm in. Chisel.
A chisel is handed down at 1:30 p.m. on Monday, February 16th. Sand Cave would open once again. For 17 days, Floyd had been trapped underground, stuck in the same position. 4 days without heat or light. 12 without food or water. But maybe the dripping of the cave water had provided him with some sustenance? There are stories of people surviving harsher extremes. Rescuers frantically tugged at rocks to widen the hole. Everybody stood by, absolutely silent, peering into that hole. Ed flashed his light into the gap, then eased himself in. Brenner aimed his light around the room, and then, finally, at Floyd. The first thing he saw was a golden shimmer. It was not the light bulb. It was the reflection of Floyd's tooth. His mouth hung open. He was dead.
Oh.
Brenner was helped out of the cave, and he delivered the news.
Dead.
Oof.
A coroner would later state that Floyd succumbed to exposure, and that they had missed him by just 3 days, about the same time that the light bulb had gone out. But what would they do now with the body? The shaft walls were ready to fall inwards, and risking lives to remove a corpse was seen as just irresponsible. So the following morning, officials made a decision.
Oof.
Floyd would be entombed where he lay. The cave would keep its victim. Now, this did not sit well with the family, but what could they do? The next day, they planned the funeral. The town emptied of people, and the shaft with Floyd at the bottom was refilled with soil. But that's not quite the end of the story. But if you hung on for this long, keep holding on, because things are going to continue to get interesting. But first, let me do a
Where
wrap
does
up of where
Eyebrows
everyone
go?
is and all that stuff. Context. The Collins family already had financial hardship. Locals saw Old Man Lee scouring the rescue site for glass bottles. But the owner of the land, B. Doyle, and supposed friend of Floyd, was wholly unsympathetic. He erected a sign on the highway which said, 200 yards away, the body of Floyd Collins is imprisoned in Sand Cave. Then he began charging tourists 50 cents apiece for the opportunity to gander into the hole.
Oh, it's actually
100
called
years
Crystal
later,
Cave.
He's dead. Let's call it even. Also, remember those claims of Kentucky being an open purse? Well, the state reneged on the deal. They refused to pay many of the rescuers, and most of them went home without any compensation. Some of them did make some money out of the situation, though. They lucked into vaudeville gigs and roamed the country, giving their first-person account. Miller, however, received an astonishing offer, a $50,000 contract from the Chautauqua Lecture Circuit, equivalent to the better part of $1 million in today's money. He declined. He continued to work at the Louisville Courier-Journal. The following year, his coverage of Floyd's story earned him the Pulitzer Prize. Now the brother, Homer, he needed money and he agreed to do that vaudeville circuit. He stood on stage and regaled the audience about tales of his brother, their childhood, and the tragedy. But Homer made it known why he was up here on stage trying to get money. He had a mission.
I kept thinking of Floyd lying in the muck, where he had suffered beyond our power to imagine. I would never have peace of mind if he remained there.
He wanted the money to dig Floyd up and get him out of that cave. A couple of months later, he had it.
Of course. How many commercials do you have in one video, mate?
Opening this November in Plant City. City Furniture.
And here I was getting really invested in the story. Okay.
Alright, so back to Floyd. April 17th, 1925. 7 miners showed up to the scene. They began to dig. Within a week, they had arrived at Floyd. And this time, they approached from the other side of the rock formation. That way, they could remove the rock pinning Floyd's leg. They lifted him up from his tomb and laid him down on the fresh air above. April 26th, 1925. Floyd was set to rest in the family cemetery. A stalagmite had been set as a headstone to mark out his plot. And there he lay. No, that's not actually where it ends. Okay, this is where it gets weird. 2 years later, 1927.
Excuse me?
Times have been tough for the Collins. So Floyd's dad sold Sand Cave to a dentist named Dr. Harry B.
Wait,
Thomas.
what? Why?
For $10,000.
What?
Now, Homer begged him not to, because at the time, the government was starting to buy up tons of land in the area and turn it into national parks. They had to pay at a very competitive rate. But Lee was becoming a bit old and senile by this point, and frankly, it's doubtful that he cared about Homer or Floyd or anyone else for that matter. It's 100 years later, he's dead now, let's call it even. So, the point is, in this land sale with Thomas, Lee agreed to a very odd clause. And that clause said, everything
Hey gosh, have fun.
belongs to Thomas.
It was fun talking
And
to you
should he
today.
wish, for example, to exhume a dead body and re-embalm it.
Wait,
that
what?
clause said,
I hope you have fun, Vash. Take care. And secondly, what did I just see? Everything on Lee's property belongs to Thomas.
everything on that property belongs to Thomas. And should he wish, for example, to exhume a dead body and re-embalm it and put it on display in something really tacky like a glass coffin inside a cave, maybe, then that would be his prerogative. Lee signed yes. And Thomas did exactly that. Doyle made Floyd's corpse a tourist attraction. That's right. 2 bits of gander, come and wonder at the incredible
The ticket
dead man
office
who
for
died
Floyd's
in a
cave.
But to add insult to injury, it worked. Visitors returned to Sand Cave to gawk morbidly at Floyd. Within a few months, Thomas had turned Lee's failing farm into a successful business. Now, the rest of Colin's family is horrified. They try a number of times to get Floyd returned to them, including through the legal system. But somehow, incredibly, the judge ruled in Thomas's favor. And so, there he lay for the next 2 years.
Uh-huh.
The cave was not done with Floyd. Until someone hatched a plan. 2 years later, it's midnight, outside Sand Cave. Footsteps can be heard rustling through the brush. Now, we don't know who these 2 men are, but we know why they are here. To rob a grave. They sneak inside and clamber over the rocks in the darkness. Reaching Floyd's casket, they undo the latch and throw open the lid. There is his shriveled body. They throw him in a gunny sack, and they race off into the night. For 800 yards they carry dear Floyd, like a couple of sweaty Santas about to deliver a really terrible Christmas present. Panting, out of breath, knowing that they're going to get caught any minute, they reach the Kentucky Green River hillside. There's no time. With a 1, 2, 3, they launch his body towards the river, and Floyd goes sailing into the air, up, into the starlit beyond.
Wait a second.
And landing in a bush. Oh God. The two men flee from the scene. Now the next morning, Thomas notices that the body of Floyd is somewhat missing, and he contacts the authorities. The police come, they dust the casket for fingerprints, and bloodhounds are given Floyd's scent and let loose into the hillside. A few hours later,
If only
manage
they got him
find
to the water.
A tangled up mess near the river, but this time with a leg missing. That same one that was trapped under the rock. So, despite his protest, it had been amputated. Neither the leg nor the culprits were ever found. And while it would be nice to think that this was some well-intentioned duo that did this out of the kindness of their hearts to free Floyd, it's much more likely that it was an act of vandalism because Floyd was simply too much of a hot tourist attraction. The following day, Floyd was cast back into the cave, back into his box, and it was covered by a metal lid, surrounded by a metal chain, and locked with a padlock. He was now more trapped than he had ever been. This cave had spun fate once again to make sure that its victim would never leave. And so, time passed. Floyd's body would continue to decay. The rot from his body would eventually rot the casket too, and every decade or so, it would need to be replaced. A few years later, he was no longer on display, but even then, he remained in that box for many more years. In 1961, Floyd's Cave was purchased by Mammoth Cave National Park, and it was closed to the public. There would be no more visitors. The entrance itself to Floyd's Cave was closed with a steel gate and bolted, then welded shut. But the Collins family never gave up objecting to Collins' body being left in the cave. And here is where the story ends. In 1989, at the Collins' request, the National Park Service ventured into Floyd's Cave. Continuing on a more than 60-year tradition, a team of people worked over the course of several days to remove him from the cave. They took him out, left the cave, locked it behind them, and laid Floyd to rest at the Mammoth Cave Baptist Church Cemetery.
About time.
After 64 years in Sand Cave, he is now finally at peace. The end. Thank you to Wendigoon as Floyd.
If you don't let me out,
It was
I'm gonna hire
Wendigo.
a gang of hitmen to come to your house and kill your family.
Samito as Homer.
The BTS meal McDonald's bag that has
I'm
McDonald's and
hungry.
BTS. Shut the fuck up and eat some BTS, bro.
Ordinary Things as Miller.
I'm enthusiastic, but would ultimately duck out the back exit.
Rusty Cage as Gerald.
Oh, well, hello there. Haven't seen y'all in a while. Welcome to my new home.
And many kudos as Burden.
Hey, buddy. You right down there? A little sleepy? We get you a coffee? Little cup of Joe? Little cup of Joseph? A cup of Joseph from a little sleepy guy?
Also, by the way, in case you're confused about the channels, this is how it works now. And do not forget, World of Tanks, World of Tanks.
Yep.
None of
World of Tanks, World of Tanks.
this would have happened if Floyd had got World of Tanks.
So, Floyd is basically like Kentucky's version of the dead Pope that they kept throwing in and out of a river. The fact that no matter, even after death, he was in that cave. Oh, that was so fucked. Like, just imagine. Okay. The father, he's a piece of shit. He's dead. The guy who bought the land, he's also a piece of shit, and he's also dead. They are both fucked up for even doing that. The father for, like, selling the land and everything on it, including said body, that the brother tried to get back for so long. And the people who now own the cave just kept the body in there as a tourist attraction. The one fucked up way to get what you wanted, which was making the cave into a tourist attraction. Which it was. And they made bank. God, that was such a fucked up story. And I'm sorry, by the way, Stan user, that you missed the first 17 minutes of the video. You should have seen my reaction in the first 5 minutes. Oh god, I hated seeing that cave. Just the intro freaked me the hell out. I'm kind of interested in seeing XQC's reaction to it. I might watch on my own time. But today was fun. It was really fun. I don't think I got a lot done today. I'll be frank with you. I had intended, mind you, to farm all of my cards, but I didn't even get one. In fact, I've been losing duelists this whole time. By the way, I've never seen who Wendigo is. Who would that be? Whose mans is this? I'd like to know for research. Whew. You know what, I think I'll just hold off on that. Yeah, much better. Okay, good, this is still here. Wendigo! Another one of those. Okay. I think today was a fun stream, but I think I'll end it here. Oh, Wendigo, he does a lot of conspiracy theory and other creepy type of videos. Really? You know what? Whenever... Okay, that was weird. Whenever I get my Discord up and running, we can actually organize these videos and watch them together. We can make a few days out of it. Like, for example, Mondays or Wednesdays. We can just spend... Or even the second half of the stream, we could just spend the day watching and reacting to videos. It's an interesting thought. But god damn, was that video just creepy. The cave just wouldn't let the damn guy go. Even after death. I hope you enjoy yourself too. Oh, if your streamer is on, I could raid them. Let's see, Lucy Pie. Ooh, nah. Yeah, if you got a streamer in mind, I can raid them. Otherwise, I have a few I can raid. Though they're pretty big compared. None of my streamer friends are currently online. Well, mine aren't exactly friends, but I do have streamers that I can raid. That's good. Let's go to Tectone. Why not? Wait, no, he's got like thousands. Lucy Paya. She's playing Minecraft. Okay. Let's do this. And with that, I think it's time to say goodbye.